give it a try. I'll give
Christmas
it a try.
week.
Yeah.
I got shopping.
You're I know
Not
you're lying.
Christmas. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, I was at Deanne's yesterday, and I could do a lot of shopping in there if I would just remember it's there.
Oh,
It is Deanne's. They
she's
have,
got the
I
cutest
spent
shop.
too
Okay,
much
we're
time
ready.
looking.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, there we go. Welcome, everyone. We have time now for public comment. If there's anyone, I don't see anyone in the boardroom with us. All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Have we all had a chance to take a look at the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll move the agenda as printed.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, it has been seconded. Is there any discussion on today's agenda? Hearing none, we will take the vote. All those in favor of
Yes.
approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, and
Sorry.
that is, Barb is on,
Beth.
Beth is on a mission today. All right, the next item is the approval of our minutes from our last meeting.
Madam Chair, I move the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion. It has been seconded. Do we have any discussion about our last meeting minutes? I didn't notice anything. Hearing no discussion, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes have been approved. And then, Joel, I believe you're our first visitor today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Joel, Meeker County Facilities Manager. I'm here today for our service agreements, maintenance service agreements for HVAC equipment. There's 3 agreements. There's one for the family services, one for the courthouse, and one for the highway department. I don't know if you want to approve, would you like to approve all 3 of them?
Well, I was wondering, do we do them all at
It's-
once, or they?
That's
Oh.
what I would recommend.
So I only have one question.
Yep.
I didn't see it in here, but I'm sure it is. This is kind of preventive work, isn't it?
This is mainly like we do, like our normal staff does our own, like, cleaning and doing all that maintenance stuff. This is more for the technical side of stuff, like some calibrations and things like that. We do our boiler tune-ups, like annually they do a boiler tune on each boiler. So it's more for efficiencies and things like that this agreement is for.
So I didn't read through the whole thing, just quickly. So MnDOT pays for some of this contract or no?
Yeah, they do the highway.
Okay. So I didn't know if that was the total amount or if that's our share. And it's fine, but they pay for part of it, right? And we pay for part of it.
Yes, that would be a share.
Is this just an annual payment?
Yes.
This is one.
And
So
And
it's-
then whatever we don't use, on like our normal like calibrations and things like that, we do use them a lot of times. We call in for when we do service, we use whatever hours we don't have or didn't use for that. That's kind of where we're kind of using them hours. We do get a discount in hourly rates by having a service agreement with them.
Yeah.
So that does help us out in the long run too. So.
Is this Climate Makers, is this who we've used for kind of ever then?
Yes.
But it is, so, gotcha.
I tried to get them to bid something different a couple years ago, but what happens, I think, and nothing you can do about it, but you get tied into the same people because they know the stuff, so.
And if they know the stuff, they're
Same way
probably
in your
gonna
business,
be
probably,
so
yeah.
Well, and I
much
think,
cheaper
I think
anyway.
we shopped around a couple of years ago, but
Yeah.
it's always hard to
Wasn't-
get other
it
people
is,
to come in and
because
mess
they
with
know,
your stuff.
yeah.
See what I mean? So they
kinda-
kinda,
And then, we've had a good working relationship with them over the years, and it's really worked out real well.
I will say this, I do always worry that when we have the same people over and over, that pretty soon you just start getting gouged and you sit back and get gouged. Anyway, I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, to approve 3 HVAC maintenance agreements with Climate Makers for 2022.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Is there any discussion? Are any of these particular pieces of equipment going to be replaced within our new remodeling, some of those issues, or?
Yes, there'll be some of them that will be replaced, but some of them won't be. I think, you know, kind of depends on what our options are, but they also will then, you know, the warranty parts will be ran by the person that installs the new equipment.
Okay.
So there would be some of that stuff they wouldn't be probably servicing right away. But, like there, a lot of times there are temperature controls and the digital controls that were put on are kind of, they have their system that they run. That we're using there right now is the Climate Makers, matrix system is what they're using.
Curious how that, you know,
Yeah.
25,000 will be involved with some of our remodeling, but,
Yeah, this is mainly for the service side of stuff, so this isn't installing anything new, it's more for the service maintenance of it, you know, the equipment. So we get new equipment, obviously we wouldn't have the maintenance on that, hopefully,
hopefully.
for a
yeah.
while, yes.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Joel.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Good.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Phil
Phil.
Smalls, Public Works Director. One item for you this morning, request to approve the hire of two new heavy equipment operators, Dwayne Zeska and Kobe Holtz. Both of them recommended to start B22 Step 1, which is $20.94 an hour. These are the two new positions that we've been discussing. They're in the 2022 budget. Start dates would be January 3rd of 2022.
Any certifications they have to get, or are they pretty well good?
Training, hands-on training, but they both come with CDLs, so that part's out of the way, but we'll have to get them acquainted with our equipment. So I don't expect them to have their own full-time route on their own day one, but maybe by the end of the snow and ice season this year.
So, did you have a lot of good candidates, if I may ask?
I think we had about a dozen applicants. We interviewed 6.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Have these two individuals worked for us before?
No.
Where they weren't part-time people that?
Nope.
Okay.
No,
I recognize the last name here on the first, Kobe Holtz. Didn't we have a Holtz working?
We had an employee before my time, a Holtz, yes, I understand. I think their uncle, they're some relation, not father-son, but they're
Okay.
relation there.
Not saying there's anything wrong with that,
Yeah,
I just
no,
recognize the
no,
name.
that's fine. Sure.
Madam Chair, move to approve the hiring of Dwayne Zeska and Kobe Holtz as full-time heavy equipment operators at DDM levels B22, Step 1, 20.94 per hour, with a start date of January 3rd, 2022.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Any questions for Phil?
Just curious, working out of Kingston, does that mean we get a new Kingston?
That's the plan. Yeah, we've got an operator in Kingston that wants to work out of Litchfield to be part of the maintenance crew, not run a motor grader full-time. So that'll be part of our training rotation process. He won't be able to go up there, the new employee won't be able to go up there day one, but he'll be up there training, learning how things work.
Okay.
Very good. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Phil.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry
Yes,
Christmas.
take care, Phil.
Oh,
Good morning.
good morning.
Rich, Meeker County Social Services. Folks are moving quite fast this morning.
I'm feeling the pressure.
Stop
List here,
saying it.
though.
Why would you?
A little pressure here.
Why?
We have to be done
My
at noon.
Lord.
I'm teasing.
I can't believe you brought that up. That's gonna be bad luck now.
Did I tease it?
Yes, of course.
Just
Well,
as long
I'm
as
done in
we're-
a few minutes.
We've had good intentions many times.
I know.
Well, my first order of business for you is to approve our social services vendor service contracts. These are contracts that we use to assist us in our mission of meeting our constituents' needs. They do support some of our other programs, As you can see by the RBA, some of these are county levy dollars. Most of that is from county levy dollars. And some of it does come through grant funding or reimbursables. We do get a slight administrative fee for some of these contracts, but not enough to really make much of a difference. When we had spoke previously about our overall county budget, and we talked about our investment in social services as a way of tapping into that broader pool of dollars. These are services and supports that assist us in meeting those mandates to tap into that broader pool of funding. But it's also good for our folks because it meets our mission by trying to keep folks at home wherever possible. With the exception of our Northwoods fraud contract. Our Northwoods fraud contract is something that we do receive reimbursements for dollars that are collected. These are situations where a person may wrongfully be attaining public assistance, medical assistance, cash payments, etc. And their sole purpose is to investigate those situations, make a recommendation to us, and also develop the case for the county attorney's office if we do decide to pursue any kind of collective judgments or criminal activity.
Two questions for you.
Yes, sir.
So, in my reading, correct me if I'm wrong, the LSS Guardian contract, ProWorks, and the UCAP are the three local levy dollars. The rest are all grants and everything else.
Nope.
Was there one more?
LSS is local levy. Crow's Nest, Sills is local levy.
I went
Divine
on.
House, Sills is local levy.
Local.
And there's a
local.
percentage of,
Oh, yeah.
there's a percentage of a maintenance of effort per se, where we pay a certain percentage of the overall budget. Then we receive those funds from a state grant. And the more you use, the larger the grant is. So we try to keep about 5% overutilization so we can continue to grow those dollars to bring those back into our community. LSS guardianship contract is straight local levy dollars. UCAP is straight local levies. Woodland CSP contract is a grant that we receive from Minnesota DHS, and that's just a pass-through funds. We use a percentage of that to cover not only Woodland Center services for consumer support program, but it also offsets our cost for unreimbursed case management. And we're also using some of those funds for our Meeker's Cares as far as community outreach. There's a number of brass codes that we can use those funds for things that we identify. The Woodland Center's POS contract, that is all local levy dollar. And the Northwoods fraud contract is all local levy dollar. ProWorks is also local levy dollar. However, ProWorks also does receive funds through our Medicaid waiver programs, and that's where they get most of their funding for. But there are individuals that are assessed as needing that level of care, day training, and habilitation at ProWorks, but may not meet the level of need to receive waiver funds.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, I did.
Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I read one of these contracts all the way through, and there's one point, trauma-informed. A service system with a trauma-informed perspective is one in which programs, agencies, and service providers routinely screen for trauma exposure.
Yes. That's oftentimes for our children that we're serving. Also, we have adults that experience trauma on different levels, and this is part of recognizing how that impacts the individual's overall functioning, other than just some apparent disabling condition, either cognitively or physically. But trauma definitely has an impact on the individual's ability to function. And so as we look to the way that folks are assessing individuals' overall capacity to be able to live in our community, trauma has been identified as a best practice for us to attend to to assist them in overcoming the conditions that are creating barriers for them in the community.
I saw that. Lock in, because trauma, sometimes we think of trauma in different ways, and I guess I was thinking
Trauma for me would be making the motion supporting Lutherans. I might lose my Christmas present from my mom if she got word of that. So I won't be able to make that motion, so, but.
Kind of an excerpt of Prairie Home Companion going on.
You don't have to hide that.
No left stuff for you.
No, yeah, exactly. Even though all my in-laws are Lutherans.
You're on the Lutheran train.
Yeah.
Well,
We
that
gotta
leaves
keep
an
eye on
opening
you.
for me to tell you that Mrs. Schiefelbein was in one day and said, please don't pick on Danny, he's my baby.
Oh, yeah, great.
She actually said that, Danny.
I will never bring out my mom again.
I have been waiting for months.
I gave you a
Unload that
softball.
information. But Danny, you make it so easy.
I know.
So can we do all of these together?
Yeah, that's,
That's yes.
Okay, all is one. Well,
I'll make the motion to approve the following contracts. LSS Sills, Crow's Nest, Divine House, LSS Guardianship, Thomas Allen Guardianship, Pro Works, Bethany Christian Services, UCAP, Woodland Centers, and Northwoods Fraud for January 1, 2022 to December 31st,
do we have a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion, it has been seconded. Do we hear any discussion?
Are all 9 of those the same things we've used in the past too? So
As far as the contract.
yeah, all 9 of those.
Yes, last year we went through and did a full revision of all of our contracts to have boilerplate language that was approved by the county attorney. The addendums are where the meat and potatoes of the contracts occur, so if we have to change, we can change that addendum without having to change any of the embedded language within the contract. They do meet all of our MCIT guidelines for liability coverage for our vendors, and these have gone through the county attorney process.
And this is an annual, this is done annually.
Yes,
And-
yes, because there's such a change in our potential funding mechanisms from year to year, both dollar amount and what we choose to offer as far as a local levy impact. So we do these on an annual basis.
All right. Any additional questions, discussion?
Danny, repeat the motion.
Yeah.
You're kidding, right?
Yeah.
just the Lutheran part.
I just,
You remember I said LSS specifically.
Oh, my
The devil's in
goodness.
the details there.
You know, you made the best day, you've been waiting.
I know.
Yeah.
I got a couple more too.
That'd be an addition
All
to
of
the
those.
minutes, Corey,
Not
have you
today.
captured all of this? Yes, okay. Well, hearing no further credible discussion, we shall move forward. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. My next order of business for you is to approve our social services accounts payable.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the accounts payable for social services.
I will second that, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have a motion. It has been seconded. Are there any questions
One
for
quick.
Paul?
I noticed you had 5 paternity tests last time. Is that kind of a running average?
Running.
Could
What
be an
happened
interesting
back in-
situation, or it could just be a lot of new cases that are coming through.
And that's just so they can dispute having to pay child support.
Well, no, as a matter of fact, we've just added paternity tests as a part of our child support, our child protection component. The court is interested in assuring that we have a certification of parentage for some of the individuals that are receiving support and care care through the child welfare, child protection system. Previously, we did parent searches. It might be a father that's out there that someone identifies as the father, or they may be a participant in the family and have not gone through that declaration of parentage when the child was born. And so the court wants us to certify that. So we will be seeing an increase in that area. I think it's a good thing to ensure that we're talking to the right people, not just taking people's word for it that they are or they're not the father. But we're also seeing a slight uptick in our child support collections as well. Our child support collections over the course of the last number of years really hasn't changed that much, but there are slight ups and downs, but for the most part, it's a pretty average caseload.
Thanks, Paul.
Interesting,
I had a couple questions, but not for Paul's
yeah.
bills,
Not for my bills.
not for yours.
Oh, okay.
So, Commissioner Bredesen,
Yeah.
you were, seemed like you had a question?
Why would the county have to pay for that if an individual is being pointed at and saying, well, you are the father? Who would truly be the one who would have to pay for such a test?
Well, we are mandated to do that. In the child support collections, we do receive reimbursement through 4E for that, for 4D for that. But in the child protection, we pick up the full cost of all protective proceedings.
Okay. Well, any other questions for Paul about the accounts payable? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
No, you're good.
Oh,
You're good.
well,
I
you said
didn't-
not for my bills, so I didn't know.
No, I don't have any questions for your bill. Some questions in
Coming up.
on Barb's bills.
Uh-oh.
Next, the other group.
Thank you, have a wonderful
Merry
holiday
Christmas.
season, I really appreciate it.
Merry Christmas.
Have a piece of left on your way.
Yeah, grab a piece of left, so there.
I just have one though.
Uh-oh.
And a
I
couple.
think there's plenty.
Plenty, yeah. Trying to keep Danny away from that.
You stop picking on him.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like
Absolutely
I'm,
not.
it's
No,
not like I ever asked for it.
my Christmas presents have already been purchased. I've got nothing to worry about now. All right. I believe we have, who's next here?
I will take the next one.
I flipped the page.
So next we have the public hearing for the proposed 2022 fee schedule.
All right.
So first we would need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
What?
It's on the bottom of the first page, ma'am.
Public hearing proposed. Okay. And then I flipped the page over, so we have to close the regular meeting and open again?
No.
We need to
There.
have a
Public
motion to
hearing
open the
was-
public hearing,
Okay,
which we have.
all right. I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Now we need to vote on whether or not to open the public hearing.
Do we have to take a motion on that? or
Already did.
We just,
Motion and second.
Yeah.
Motion by Paul, second by me. Vote on the public hearing.
any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, we're open.
So included in your packet is the proposed 2022 fee schedule. You'll notice there's a number of relatively minor changes. Some of it is cleaning up the location of where different fees are located at in the schedule. Some of them are more or less to recognize the way that we're currently doing business. For most of the changes are in the public works section are related to that. There were a couple of minor increases in there as well. For example, the cost of adult immunization went from $20 to $30, and so again, relatively minor, nothing too earth-shattering in there.
Madam Chair, I will make a motion to approve the proposed 2022 fee schedule.
All second, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have a motion, has been seconded. Is there any discussion?
So the only changes are those changes that you listed right below, right?
Correct.
Which is adding and
Yep,
Red
that
here.
mostly cleaning up language in terms of
Yeah.
what it was before and stuff?
yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
other questions? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
We would now need a motion to close the public hearing. Thank you.
Madam Chair, motion to close the public hearing for the fee schedule of 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, it has been seconded to close our public portion here of our meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries, and we move on.
Geez, I hate to jinx you, but you're right on time.
Stop. Oh my gosh.
You're gonna kill Beth yet.
Oh, man, what-
She wants to see Christmas, darn it, Paul.
Merry Christmas to everybody.
Oh gosh.
All right, Mary.
Good morning, Mary
Yes.
Sprider, IT Director, and I am here today seeking approval for the Information Technology Strategic Plan. We started working on this plan back in April through the IT Committee, and we eventually came up with 4 areas of focus with corresponding measurable goals for the IT department. The first area is business process automation. And goals here, I guess this was mostly driven by the paper payable system that we have. So this one mostly involves implementing an automated workflow system for payables for the county. This would actually be a project run through the treasurer's office, so it'd be a partnership for IT and the treasurer's office. There's a couple other goals in here, configuring some integrations so that the existing workflow systems we have can work a little smoother, and then doing some work with teams.
So can I just ask a quick question? When you talk about workflow, just give me an example of what is gonna change from the way it is right now. So for me, workflow sounds like it's gonna touch fewer desks before it gets, am I right there?
Yeah, so like, for example, the paperless AP process would be that the bill comes in, the treasurer's office scans it, then it gets routed through the system to the departments for approvals and verifications and all that sorts of stuff. So there's just less paper floating around, less opportunity for things to get lost.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And several of the departments have workflow systems, the attorney's office, the sheriff's office, and social services. A big part of social services day, the mail goes the same way. The mail all comes into a centralized area, it gets scanned in, and the work is tracked that way. There isn't any chasing of signatures, and the workflow is all managed through that software.
Okay, good.
Those are workflows, so streamlining the workday, I guess, is kind of a way to put it.
Good.
Have we ever had an IT audit where they come in and they say, okay, here's duplications of services, here you can eliminate this and so forth? Have we ever had one?
I don't know that specifically we've had something that would identify the full department. Of course, we participate in audits through the state auditor process, or there's some audits through the sheriff's office or the social services offices where IT has to answer questions about our processes.
When we were at AMC, the place where you guys got the free phone charger, I spoke with them, I can't remember the name of that company.
AWS.
Yeah, and they don't do it, but when I was talking to them about software, they said you should consider having an audit where they just come in and check for overlapping things. I don't know what firms do it or anything, but you know, that might be some well-spent money to actually find out if we're paying licenses and so forth, we wouldn't need to.
Yeah.
I also think for security, they're
Yes.
talking about it yesterday at the hospital too, if they ever had an audit, because with things like what just happened at Prime West and different things, to make sure that we're as secure as we need to be with everything that's going on. I know they're talking about doing it up there.
Did either of you two go to the dark web at the AMC?
No, I did not.
Because Commissioner Fox did, and he came out of there and he just shaking his head and he said, holy mackerel, that's enough to scare anybody.
Yeah.
So,
We did do a security audit earlier this year.
You
okay,
did do one,
good.
okay. And everything was
There's things for us to work on.
Yeah.
good,
We're working through those.
good, good.
That is something that'll come up again through the IT committee.
Absolutely, okay.
Madam Chair, move to approve information technology.
I don't know if
strategic
she's
plan.
done with, are you done with your, she's not done with her
Oh,
presentation.
you're not?
I can be. There's 4 areas. The
Got
first
him
one
trained
was
anyway.
was the automation of the business processes. The second area is communication and collaboration. And there are goals in here. The biggest driver for this category was replacing GroupWise with Outlook, and we're mostly done with that, still in the middle of that. Also some options for Teams, wireless connectivity, some work with the county website, and then upgrading the meeting room technology. So those are all goals for communication and collaboration.
I'm just
There is
gonna
a-
throw this in about our county website. I wanna change, but I still think we could do better on our county website. I still think there's some difficulty for people, just people in general, to get around in it. I
I'm
think
one
it's a
of them.
vast, well, you're probably speaking for me too. I think it's a vast improvement from what we
Do we
had
have one?
when I became a commissioner, but I still think we can
Go
do
and play
better.
on it.
And I don't know what your opinion is of that, but I'm glad to see maybe we're working on
Yeah,
it.
through Civic Plus, I believe, is our vendor. We have the opportunity for a free redesign of the website. It's one of those things we need to schedule the time in.
I sometimes go to different counties, of course, to see how they're charging for, and there's counties that are just as difficult, but not that it's very difficult. But if I was gonna rate ours, I would like to see it a little bit easier to maneuver.
A little more user friendly.
That's the word.
So you can
So,
And there's
Yep.
other counties that use the same exact.
Oh, yeah.
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah,
you can tell when you go on there, can't you?
Yeah, it's like-
Yeah, so,
That's like, oh, this looks very
But-
familiar.
our layout is certainly dated, which is why we're being offered the free redesign at this
so.
point.
Is it really free?
Time.
Yeah.
Time is the cost.
Third area is security, and that one, Paul had a question about that already. So there's some areas in there for some growth and some specific goals about adding security that we know about, and also looking at training to learn more about security that we don't know about yet, but need to implement as things change. There's also some things in there concerning policy. IT has had a need for writing up some policy, and some security is a big part of that. The last area is operational excellence. Goals here are mostly concerning replacement of computers. We used to have computers that got into the 10 or 11 years old, and then when software changed, we were scrambling to make to keep up and to make that change happen. So a lot of it concerns replacement schedules, keeping things current, keeping things under warranty, upgrading our office software and infrastructure, and then continuing on with the IT committee as part of that as well, and so that we can have discussions about what the needs are for the departments and how we can encompass those needs into this plan for the future.
Going off what Paul said, in terms of an IT audit, I mean, that's part of the committee, it's kind of its purpose, it's kind of to do an internal IT audit ourselves. Is it wise to actually have someone outside look into this or not? Before I'd want to pass this, I would think you'd want to have that information first, because maybe what they suggest versus what our goals that Mary has, maybe that some things there aren't corresponding the same or not. I'm just asking this in terms of, because I thought it's a good point. Because if we've never had it, but I know that's what the resurrection of the IT committee was for.
Yes, so certainly the purpose of this document is intended to ensure that we have alignment across the board as far as what our values and our goals are. There's specific projects that are going to come out of that, but do we feel that the four values that are identified in this plan are the areas that we want to focus? And that's what we heard out of the IT committee and the reason that we're here today. There are things that we're going to continue to identify that turn into specific projects that are going to continue as we move along. So this isn't, we've approved this today and we're never going to look at it again. The intention is that we'll be back each year updating this with more information and performance metrics and different things to show you this is the work that we're doing in IT and the collaborative work that's happening across the organization. Because that's really what the purpose is to have something that we can lean on to ensure that collaboration is occurring. So that we don't end up with the sorts of things that we're talking about, which is you have one group who's using one software here, another group who's using a different software here for the same business process. We want to be able to streamline that where we can.
I think, Danny, part of me is saying an outside audit, because you tend to get people who are very protective of something they've used for years, aren't willing to let go. And when it comes from the outside in, they look and identify those areas.
Oh, I honestly, I 100% agree. I like the idea. I just didn't know if it would change any of this part in
No.
terms of goals. And honestly, if there's any improvements, we have to approve it through the budget process.
I would say it probably will change things. However, like I said, the intent is that this is a living document that we're going to continue to update and change anyway. So I don't think it would change the way that we're going to move forward tomorrow.
In regard to the purchase of and use of various types of software, all of that, if a department has a request or would like to look into a certain type of software, all of that channels through you first, doesn't it, Mary? I mean, we don't have the auditor and the treasurer and the highway department purchasing whatever sort of software they want. Doesn't everything have to be coordinated and?
Yes, for the most part. It's something specifically used by a department, and IT doesn't have any, need to partner with them on it. It's not that they can't do it, but most often there's a partnership there established. And if it's countywide software, of course, then that would all run through this IT committee.
I'm chuckling because I don't think it's always been that way, but I think it's a lot better now, isn't it?
It is better. It's a lot better.
I think that's one of the reasons we started the IT committee. I wasn't chuckling at you, but there was an issue for a while where people had a pot of money, so without, and
And then
what you
why buy
hand
the
up.
same software 3 times?
And I think that's one of the reasons we established the IT committee a couple years ago, isn't it, Mary?
Yes, that was one of the reasons. There's also been some growth in the IT department.
Right.
When I first started and I was the only IT person, it was a little difficult to be in partnerships with departments on their needs for IT. And we've grown to the point where we have the committee and we have enough staff where we can partner with the departments much better than we used to.
So,
Good.
not
Yeah.
trying to prolong this discussion, but CPT, can they help us at all in that? I mean, we're a member of CPT. Do they do those kind of things where they come in? You guys are laughing. Okay, that's all I needed to hear.
Don't do that.
CPT is a very small, almost non-existent part of IT. CPT and the I-Series is still under the
Right,
auditor's office.
okay, that's fine. I didn't know
That's a
where
separate-
that was going. Okay, very good. You can make your motion.
Good
Did you make
questions.
it already?
Paul's got a motion on the floor.
He
I'll
does.
second Paul's motion to approve the strategic plan.
Okay, we have a motion. It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Any other questions for Mary? Okay, hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Remember I discussed with you about that PDF wanting to sell us the rotator and the things?
Turn it sideways?
I have the same thing on my personal computer at home now. So it must be a game they're trying to play. So if you guys are trying to rotate your PDFs, so you don't have to tip your screen to read them, they wanna bill us for that. So we need to
You know,
figure that
we
out.
can send them to you in a
Different
so it's
form?
turned
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah,
You can, but then if we get someone from outside of
right.
Why don't you buy it and let us know how it
No.
works out?
Let's only buy it once.
Do you wanna make a motion on any of these ditch loans coming up?
Yeah.
To get ahead of things a little bit?
Christmas spirit.
Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Mary.
Thanks,
We're
Mary.
getting pretty excited, so I thought,
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, Barb, help me. Here we go.
My mother's baby too.
I know.
First item I have before you is the loan requests, and as we put in the request for board action, that we would be making some changes. So I did email them out yesterday, and also did a line in the request for board action so you could see what I was changing. So as of this morning, when we reviewed where we are at with collections, remember that we sent out to the taxpayers about $823,000 worth of assessments. As of this morning, $428,000, so we're right at about 50%. We expect 70-ish%. Most people coming to my counter do not want that to go to their tax statement, number one, and do not want to incur interest. So it's been a busy couple of weeks with regard to payments, but it's all good. So before us, I have a request that we will be able to pay back. So I have a payment suggestion. That's what's on the list up there, $156,600. I made sure that the accounts would stay, positive to the end of the year, like based on what we were paying. And also, we have that 60-day window in the next year of payables that could come back that were anticipated. So I tried to do as best I could to retire as many loans as I could, but yet not be so aggressive that we would be causing a negative balance in the funds that would be recognized by the audit. I also was able to retire a few of the loans entirely, as you see in two columns that I revised there. However, I do need to also ask for two new loans. One will be County Ditch 19, as we continue to have issues with that and more billing, as we are aware. And also on County Ditch 32, because we had a very large tile repair bill come in, and I haven't received enough payment, because that's going to be spread over 3 years, and so that sometimes causes a little bit of a collection issue. So if there isn't questions, we anticipate at year end to have $570,000 worth of loans. But keep in mind that that large amount is still with County or Joint Ditch 52, which was $322,000 to start with, and that is on such a long payment plan. So when we look at that, I feel that we're doing very well to retire the loans and to make the accounts positive with the assessments we put out there. So if there's no questions of me or any other information you'd like to hear from, then I recommend the two motions, please.
Well, you sent out that email this morning. Is that the motion that you want now?
The one that I sent out late yesterday afternoon, yes,
The
please.
corrected, yeah.
Corrected one, and I
Yeah.
redlined it because I did add one ditch in for more payments. And I also took some out in terms of not having to take a loan because I received enough fund that I believe we will have a positive balance at year end.
The RBA is updated though, correct? I mean,
The one that I sent
that's
to you.
the act.
That's
I mean,
what she sent you yesterday.
yeah,
One I
it's
sent yesterday
lined
with
and
the lines in it. I
yeah.
purposely put lines in so you
Yeah,
could see what I
yeah.
was making for changes. I wasn't
Yep.
sure.
No, I mean, but that's
Yes.
the last revision.
That's what I want you to.
Okay.
I like that, I appreciate it.
Yep, that's what I want you to go with today, yes, please.
So you want two separate motions?
I think it should be, it's easier to identify it when we're taking a
One's-
loan and.
One's going one
paying
way and
so that
one's
it's
the other.
separate.
So.
I would entertain a motion for the first request.
I'll do a long one, Paul.
All right,
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve repayment of loans from ditch fund to revenue fund in the amount of $156,600 plus $7,413.75 accumulated interest for County Ditch 8, 12, 15, 18, 26, 35, 36, 41, Judicial 17, Judicial 18, Judicial 29, Lateral B, Judicial 32, and Judicial 52.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion that has been seconded. Are there any questions? Any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? First motion carries.
All right, Madam Chair, move to approve loans from the revenue fund to ditch fund in the amount of $13,000 for County 19 and 32 at 2% interest.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay. Motion has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
And carries.
The next item is an opportunity to apply for a voting equipment grant. Did identify in that voting equipment grant that in the 22 budget, we had put in requests to do electronic poll pads in all of our locations, which would add 5 poll pads. This grant could, if awarded, grant 75% grant money, 25% match. What we did not put in the 2022 budget request was for additional backup units. When I reviewed the grant, and it was problematic as I went through it because the grant application asked for the vintage of every one of our pieces of equipment, the serial number, the version we were running, and there was just so many details as I threw up my hands and I got to the end going, oh my goodness, I also need a resolution of the board. So it was very cumbersome to go through, and yet, if we can get any money, it's certainly favorable. I felt that in there, a potential cost to do 2 backup units. We right now have 1, and if we have 1 vintage, that's 2016. We never know when that equipment could go down, and that could possibly impact voters or our ability to work smoothly in one of the locations or another. So I put in for a backup unit for each to see if that would fall into the category. We do, and there's several levels of priority, we do fall in level 2 and 3 of priority. So if level 1 takes the majority of the dollars, obviously they won't get to 2 and 3. But with your permission, I would like for you to approve the resolution that Andrew and I put together so that we could have that signed and emailed off with the application that I've already put together.
Madam Chair, I move to approve a resolution authorizing the county auditor to complete and apply for voting equipment grant funding.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, and it has been seconded. Is there any discussion about the resolution?
Barb, do you still have the same number of polling places, or did anyone else switch over this
We
year?
had no changes, and I was scouting to get that. I do not have all of the polling location resolutions from our jurisdictions, and so those that I didn't have, that I anticipated could possibly be making a change or we're holding out, there will be no mail ballot changes, either pro or against. In other words, there's no new ones, there's none going backwards. So we will have 10 mail ballot precincts as we had in 20.
So you haven't, nobody's decided not to do mail-in, because I heard a lot about it a couple of years ago.
Correct.
Very good, thank you.
And many of them did polls, mailings. I met with 3 in person with their constituents, some of them a little aggressive, very passionate for what they wanted to see one way or the other. And in the end, all 3 remained where they were and felt that what they had made for a choice was a good choice.
So your equipment that you do have, I know it gets transported to the different places. Is it in, the working equipment is still in good shape?
Correct. The oldest equipment that we're using right now was purchased in 2016. Most of our equipment is 18 and 20, so we're very fortunate that it's new. The one item that we purchased in 2016, we probably would reserve to a backup here to run for our mail ballot or absentee, just in case that would be a problem. We have 1 unit, 1 scanning unit that goes to Litchfield City, and it would be pretty problematic if that went down and they didn't have someone to replace it with in 15 minutes to a half hour. So that's why I'm thinking that maybe it would be prudent to have another unit. The sad part is the units aren't the cost. The cost is the software and the programming and the maintenance that we have, and that's every year and it keeps on. So there's where I want to be prudent to the taxpayers also, in that how many units are we going to sit here and do that with? By the same token, these very passionate people are very concerned about equipment and failure and testing, and I want to make sure that I have that as well.
It's only gonna
Fine
break when
line
you
that you're
use it.
going to need to balance
Yeah.
with what has happened.
How many polling places are there?
We have 14 sites, that's including us, so there's 13 active sites, plus the courthouse here is an active site for those 10 mail. So there's 14 active sites on election day.
And each of those
Precincts.
has their own machine.
That's correct. With the exception that some of our smaller ones do not have what is not required. So if it's required to have assistive voting, that's everywhere, all 14. We have 2 locations, Manana and Darwin City, that are very small. Their potential voters are 200 to 300 or less, depending upon how many exercise voting, absentee, and et cetera. They have to use central count. So when they close up their poll location, they bring their ballots here and they share 1 unit that's here. Could we potentially put it there? Yes, but then we would be adding still more equipment. And then here at the county, we have one unit that we use specifically for absentee and one unit specifically for mail balloting, because they really are different, but they're very similar, and it makes for a much smoother transaction to run them in. So that's 14 active sites, and then what I'm also asking for in this grant is that every location have the electronic roster, so we don't provide paper anywhere. And some of those things are very beneficial because, number one, we don't have to go back and scan all that voting history afterwards. The reconciling is much clearer, and it's also very clear at the poll location if somebody comes and they try to register them and they don't belong there, it won't go in. So in other words, they don't get registered in an incorrect poll location because the equipment doesn't allow for that. And sometimes we see that happening, people that are unfamiliar, or people that think that they can vote wherever they go, and sometimes our judges just make a mistake. So that would be very beneficial to have that in every location, and
All of
there
our-
was a few that we didn't have it because they were smaller.
All of our judges, they get trained on all of that, it's part of the training.
The auditor training begins in April, and they've actually assigned us with 4 full days. I don't know how that's all gonna work yet with staffing and who we're gonna pull in.
Wow.
Because it is required that we're in person, but with the pandemic 2 years ago, everything was done remotely. So I don't know if they're trying to catch up or just give us more opportunities to spread out, because there can be 300 plus people at that. And that's a lot of training.
You bet.
So looking forward to that as, well, maybe not looking forward to it, but looking forward
Wait
to
a minute.
22. It'll be okay.
All right. Well, very good. We have a motion. It has been seconded for the resolution. Is there any additional discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, since this is a resolution, we will require a roll call. Corey, may I have you take care of the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Commissioner Olberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Schiefelbein.
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Bredesen.
Yes. Roll call passes. The motion carries unanimously.
Julie, at this point, I wish to go to the hearing, skip the other items of mine, and we'll make connection with Kale, the attorney for Rankin Noonan, to help with the County Ditch 19.
Okay, okay,
We have audience people
very good.
for this continued hearing.
We will need to recess as county board and convene then as county ditch authority. We'll move down the agenda a little bit here.
So he just hasn't logged in yet?
Yeah, I don't see him.
Okay.
Do you want to just resend him the link, maybe?
We right on time? Yes, we are. Good. Okay. It's here.
Is this your way of getting the lawyer fees down? So we just go right, as soon as he locks in, then we're locked in, right?
Good,
I
thank you.
did offer for him to drive over if he felt it was better, being we had so many in person, and it was gonna be an unfair advantage. And he felt that our equipment worked so well that he was gonna be fine with it.
Looks like he is a little optimistic.
Oh, wait a minute. And then there was today. Ah. Okay.
It's nothing big.
This was done. Well, I was thinking of that. I will maybe get rid of this. It's gotta be hot, it's gotta burn all the way down.
See how you rate versus the Augusta and women of my family. They are pretty, but I'm wondering if there's missing ingredients in it.
They're real. They're not plastic.
Oh.
And I didn't make them.
That's a relief.
They sent a bunch over, yeah, I'm like.
So I just sent it.
You never even finished your first piece.
Well, I'm flavoring it.
Like Luther,
Died in.
I could have a Luther.
I turned
beef stick.
into it. Yeah,
You turned
Lutheran beef
into it.
stick,
There you.
exactly.
No, my dad used to eat something. He walked by and eat it hot.
Oh, really?
Oh, multiple things you can put in there.
And
Oh.
usually for my wife, I just eat it, just grab it and eat it plain.
Does he call
I
him?
have a good snack, you know, on the way.
I like
Out the
butter
door.
and a little bit of sugar
Yeah.
on
That's
it.
so much work, man. I'm usually late anyway. Just grab
Grab
one.
it.
No, never even tried it until I was married. I had no idea what it was.
Well, sure. It's just not part of your
What's that?
culture.
You make it out of real potatoes or potato?
Real potatoes, yeah.
You do that.
Well, does
Your
that taste
wife
different?
is,
Okay, Kale's
It tastes
in.
like real potatoes. Sure. Really?
That was my fault.
I can't tell the difference.
potato is a potato.
Never admit to that.
I have to do it
Your
daily.
wife is Scandinavian.
You're about the only one in this room that doesn't
So
tell
you
you.
get both sides of
Kale, can
Oh,
you
yeah,
hear us?
exactly. I do get
different
both
kinds of
sides,
foods
exactly.
and goods.
Yep, we can hear you.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, marrying a Scandinavian Lutheran, yeah, that was real
But that was a shocker.
interesting 14 years ago. I use the word interesting.
Yeah.
Covers a lot of bases.
Exactly. On both sides.
Oh, dear.
And that they're gonna rent it.
Yeah, it probably wasn't a blessing on her side either.
Yeah. That was just after they met me. You know, I had nothing to do with the Catholic part. Just my general personality, I think.
I was actually I'm reading a book on Bill Kennedy, back in the 30s, kind of when he was ambassador to Britain.
We're not even
sure. But German Catholics, he secured the vote for FDR for German Catholics.
We've got Kale
Like the
here
Wolves
with
of
us.
Society.
Oh,
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the first time I ever read that.
I don't know. Because I got
Not the exact Catholic we want to model after, but.
He was like, we can,
We're waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm observing.
that's why Eden Valley had an Irish Catholic church.
Oh, really?
Kale, can you hear us?
Yes. Irish ones. There's
We're good?
now.
Can you see us?
I tried to get it.
I can see Barb.
My dad was German Catholic. My mom was.
So
Irish.
we're some video on here, okay?
That
was a little-
was a rub.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a good
Yeah. Because they've been, so they were probably in the 50s,
Yeah, 52.
52.
To me,
But actually,
Is it working?
yeah,
Okay.
there was no.
At that time.
No, I mean, you'd think there would be, but there just wasn't.
school wasn't all that.
Same with mine.
But I don't
They were-
think she's in
They didn't care
I
at
got
all,
it.
either of them.
Yep.
And now they do.
He's gone.
We've been having some technical difficulties all morning here. There's a little glitch involved, so.
Joe, are you able to click the share screen?
Sure, it can. It's good stuff, Paul.
What we're doing is removing
Made that yesterday afternoon.
attorney. So our attorney is removing.
That's why when
So that's why we're kind of saving some money.
I was rolling last night.
That's what they do.
You are.
It's not.
What do you think, guys? Joe?
We just had a little discussion. Should be talking, I'm not sure. Can you go back to, so we had bids.
Sure, but I think my mom had
Oh.
the same book.
Oh, I
Joe
think.
Kennedy.
It's like 400.
Yeah.
I don't,
Oh,
Always been
I
intrigued.
thought, how did he dare tell
you
you?
gotta go back to that.
That was
I don't
working.
care.
Really? Now we're ready.
He's
Everything
intriguing to
looks
say
good.
the
Wow,
least.
how would he dare say that?
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
Oh,
we have hopefully our technology cooperating with us. It took a minute. We have recessed as county board and convened now as the County Ditch Authority. And we have the continuation of the public hearing here today. And I'll turn it over to whomever would like to, I don't know if it's Barb, if I turn it over to you. Or over to Kale. Kale, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Very good. Yep, it's a little faint.
Okay, I will speak up.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Drainage Authority Board. This board met on November 17th for the initial public hearing on the redetermination of benefits and damages for County Ditch 17. The board took public comments at that hearing, and the board might remember that there were some comments from landowners objecting to benefits related to Chicken Lake. You can see that Chicken Lake is marked on your screen. Acres that are within Chicken Lake, which at the hearing the viewers explained were drained, and by being drained then were reclaimed from state ownership to private ownership to those properties that are riparian to the lake, in the viewers report were recommended for the assessment of benefits. A couple landowners showed up at the public hearing, objected to that, claiming that there is no benefit to their properties attributable to the ditch. And the board then, following the public comment portion of that hearing, closed the public comment so that they could continue the hearing to today's date, and directed staff to look into this matter further and then come back today to the board with a recommendation. So I'm going to go through some information and legal research that I did for the board. I think following me, Madam Chair, you might want to ask one of the viewers to respond to some of these comments. And then it's up to the board's discretion if they want to reopen the floor for any public comments. If they do following that, or if they don't following a presentation from the viewers, then there should be some more board discussion on this issue. And then ultimately some guidance from the board as to its decision or whether it wants to have this investigated further. The portion that you see on your screen that says meandered water body, the black line that is identified as locally as Chicken Lake, an area similar to that black line appears on the Minnesota Public Waters inventory as public waters. So following the drainage of the lake, the state, when it conducted the public waters inventory, did designate Chicken Lake as a public waters, and along with that comes some restrictions. So although the acres or the lake bed acres beneath the lake may be owned privately as a result of County Ditch 19 being constructed, what's happening above those acres is subject to state DNR regulation as public waters. So not all uses on top of those privately owned acres are allowed. The landowners who own those acres need to follow and respect the requirements in 103G and the related rules. The viewers report assigned benefits for Ditch 19, primarily based on classification of lands for agriculture production, and then states that special consideration was given to the rest or to other lands. And so I believe the viewers would say that these acres don't follow under those ag production formulas. They follow under the reference to special consideration. So that was questioned at the public hearing. At the public hearing, the viewers said there's a benefit here that is related to a recreational benefit, and also related to biomass used for energy. I think the biomass reference, Mr. Rehnquist called me this morning, we had some discussion and I asked some follow-up questions on that, is really talking about whether the landowners have a right to harvest and use the cattails or aquatic vegetation biomass and sell that for energy production. I think the concern that I have, board, with assigning a benefit on that basis is that there are restrictions that come along with the public waters designation that would be different if this was just wetland or cattail acres that were between water and upland, and that argument or that basis was being used. Under Minnesota law, the aquatic plants that are growing in public waters are the property of the state. And you can get permits to cut those down or harvest those for limited reasons and in extremely limited quantities. But just because you own the acres underneath the public waters, you do not own the emergent vegetation or the cattails that grow on top of those actual acres. So I think the board needs to give special consideration here to that public water status and what that restriction does on the use of the property. We don't have an exact delineation of where the public waters are. That's something that can only be done through an ordinary high water mark study that I think for purposes of this proceeding probably would take perhaps too much time. But of course, if that's what the board wants, further follow-up would be needed in order to do that. The viewers do have another basis that they talked about at the public hearing supporting benefits, and that was the recreational benefit. My understanding of that is that that is based on comparable sales data that essentially says near this area, the viewers have looked at the value of property similar to this property that has been sold for value. And the theory that the viewers use is, but for the construction of County Ditch 19, these acres that could be sold today would not be allowed to be sold because they would be owned by the state had the ditch not drained the acres and made the ownership of the bed private. Mr. Rehnquist called me this morning. I believe the sales value that they used was for property that is similar in land use type, meaning it was wetland, with cattails, but that property was not subject to the public waters restrictions. And so the value of that property might be inflated. Ron did mention that one of the viewers does have some sales data for property that does have a public waters restriction, but it sounds like perhaps that property has some differences as well. And I think it would be helpful to the board maybe if the viewers could go over that and explain, what the value is of that comparable sales property. But in short, the theory is the ditch created a property right or an acreage right that could be sold, and comparable sales data says that that sale is of value. I think the board would just need to look carefully at the similarities and the differences between those comparison properties and this one. I've researched this pretty exhaustively. I've looked for other cases where benefits have been assigned to a drained, meandered, and navigable lake and then been challenged, and looking for case law guidance on, what courts have ruled as far as guidance to what 103E, the drainage code, says for this type of situation. There's not cases I can find that are exactly on point. The cases do say that there needs to be a discernible benefit, and it needs to be based on, what the ability is to use the property today. So while I understand that Ditch 19 created more acres for these properties, I think what happened after Ditch 19 with the public waters inventory and the restrictions that those brought to this land needs to be given due consideration by the board. I think that my recommendation to the board is that the board instruct the viewers to the best of their ability, take the acres that are within the what would appear to be the ordinary high water mark. We don't have that legally, but I do understand the viewers could look at the acres that are likely going to be protected by the DNR as public waters and remove those from the viewer's report. I think prior to talking to Ron this morning, I understood that those acres were labeled in the viewer's report as reclaimed acres. And so the draft findings you have in front of you recommend removing the benefit for the reclaimed acres. I'm not sure that that's quite right. So we might get some more information from the viewers at this hearing as to if that's the board's decision, how that might be done, and how they might be able to revise the report to meet the board's wishes. All the drainage code says, Madam Chair and board, is that the board has the authority to approve the viewer's report as recommended or approve the viewer's report with amendments. So if you believe and find that the viewer's report as filed is correct, you have the authority to approve that as filed with you. If you believe that the benefits are overstated, even though the viewers might disagree with your findings, you do have the authority to ask them to correct the report to meet your findings and then attach that to your findings as the final report approved by the board. So with that, Madam Chair, I think if there's questions from the board about the law, the public waters restrictions, I can take those now. But ultimately, I think the board should hear from the viewers today on the same matter and then decide whether to take public comment and then end this continued hearing with some discussion on how the board believes and finds for this issue.
Very good. At this point, I can ask for comment or questions from the board.
Cale, this land in question is not a part of any federal conservation program or anything like that, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
And there's never, Cale, there's never been any case law that suggests that a similar situation where a ditch was in this situation for a Chicken Lake and gave benefits. Has there been any case law where it has said, okay, the board passed it, said there's some rights there, and that where it's overturned?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Scheffelbein, there is no case directly on point to this situation. There is case law that says it's not enough just to be in the watershed. There has to be some discernible benefit, and the board needs to give consideration to the property for its use, what it can be used for. And so I think ultimately in the board's decision, it needs to consider what the public waters restrictions of the property are.
You mentioned something about the DNR having some dealings with this. How many acres are involved that have to do with the DNR?
Commissioner, or Madam Chair, it's a really good question. The public waters inventory for bodies like Chicken Lake, their jurisdiction starts and stops at the ordinary high water mark. And there's a statutory process where that line can be officially and legally set. It has not been set for this water body, to my knowledge. It takes some time to go through. But that is the legal mark at which the DNR or the state would claim its jurisdiction. So when I talked about the vegetative plants in public waters are owned by the state, it would be those that are below that line.
Does the DNR pay any taxes on this piece of property? Are they involved with the tax situation here at all?
They are not, because the acres are owned privately.
Okay.
But the state has the restrictions on what happens above those acres, above the lake bed.
Okay. You mentioned something about that this could be amended by removing the DNR acres How is that then determined?
Yeah,
The-
so I think we could hear from the viewers on their ability to do this. If they say, yes, we could sit down and look at a map and we could remove the acres that, appear to be within what we think the ordinary high water mark would be. That would be my recommendation, is that the viewers come back with a recommendation on the acres that are below that line where the state's jurisdiction would start, and that will use that as a basis for removal.
But based on what you just said, Cale, then we would have to have a ordinary high water mark established.
I don't believe that you would need to have that. We could certainly check into, whether that could be established and how long that would take. But I think for the purposes of this hearing, it's probably going to be a process that takes much longer than the board's going to want to wait.
Has it ever been done before? Would there be a mark that has been done historically in the past? Or does
I'm
the
not aware
DNR,
that
does the DNR have the ability to give us a guesstimate on something like that?
we can certainly check with them on that.
We don't have a representative here today from DNR? No? We have the
don't.
neighbors. Sure.
Madam Chair, I'd like to entertain Ron and the viewers' report, because I think their discussions with Cale in the past
Might answer some
or
of
steer
those.
us at least in a.
Okay.
They definitely had conversations, so I think that's.
Cale, I'll turn it over to our reviewers at this time. That's okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
You bet. Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't take enough of these.
We can share.
Just
We-
for information.
We
only.
can share.
Yeah, we can
Share.
That is one of the pages of the original 1905 viewers report. This one, I think I got it. This was,
Thank you.
and his information on what we found is probably the most accurate or the most consistent. Oh, okay. Comparable sale. Okay. So after the initial hearing, we went back and re-looked at specific comparable sales, trying to identify those that would most reflect the values of the area within Chicken Lake. The sale that I provided you is probably the most similar. It's in southern Meeker County, 40-acre tract. There are about 2 acres of upland, and the rest is exempt wetlands, and as the photo shows, they're all cattails. That property sold in 2020 for $60,000 or $1,500 per acre for recreational purposes. We did look at other sales within the surrounding counties as well. It's very difficult to find a sale that solely is wetlands. There are lots of wetlands sold, but they're all part of a larger tract sale. To separate out the values applied, mostly depends on the buyer. If I'm an agricultural producer and I have a wetland in the middle of that field, it has zero value to me as to the wetland. But if I'm a recreational or a hunter, as you go around, right now the recreational lands are selling up to $4,000 or $5,000 an acre in places, not everywhere. So it's real difficult to find them. But within the surrounding counties, I found about 5 or 6 other sales. Some of them being family sales. As to the lowest value that sold for about $750 per acre, that was primarily wetland cattails. But the 2 other ones that were mostly arm's length transactions sold for $1,560 and $1,450 respectively. One being a 30-year WRP easement for reestablishment of that wetland. So the values that we applied were for, within the statute, not for the agricultural use only, but for other uses, when the ditch system provides it. And as Cale tried to reiterate, is we said these acres were state acres. The ownership of all of these acres was transferred to riparian rights, even though they're restricted. we did not find any public water sales, cat sales, where that restriction was in place. So I can't say that these sales are exact comps, but they're the best that we have. So with that, we looked at, yes, these acres, although they're riparian now, they could be torn title, they can be bought and sold. Whether they're under the water or above the water, it was our opinion that those acres are saleable. We did find one sale in Candioi County that was half uplands and woods, and half was open water within a lake that wasn't meander, protected waters basin. But trying to separate those two uses was pretty difficult, so we didn't use that one specifically, but it does show that protected waters do sell as part of parcels. So, we looked at that. The acres that we looked at were those listed as reclaimed acres on the original report. The original report had 29% of the total benefit for those acres within Chicken Lake. It is now down to about 16 with our recommended current values. We did recommend $1,200 an acre as to the value. We did not put a specific class in. We classed them similar to other pasture lands, even though the use is different. The range of values falls within that same mass appraisal approach. We don't do, every acre a different value or every land use. There are acres within the upper water contributing watershed that we looked at, and they had to fit in one of the classes of value. So that's how come our value was $1,200 an acre. We agreed, talking to you this morning, that we think there is value to all of those acres, irregardless of that restriction, and irregardless if they're under the water or not under the water, because they can be bought and sold. And wet acres, whether they're open water or cattails, do sell in the market for recreational value. So we will adjust the report however the board directs us. It will be our report with your direction. But that can be adopted or attached as the adopted report when that's done. So.
Ron, just to reiterate then, so the original 100 years ago, this land we're talking about was at 29% and you reduced it to 16%?
With the inclusion of the additional acres and the reduction of value of these acres compared to the original percentages, it reduced the percent of benefits from 29 originally to 16, which is what their percent would be now on the current recommendation. If you lowered that or adjusted the acres, the percent within the lake would change proportionally.
Madam Chair, Ron, can you arrived at the value, can you just go through that quickly for me one more time?
Because it's a mass appraisal, we
Okay.
don't put specific value on each individual parcel or necessarily specific use. We looked at those lands within Chicken Lake and compared the recreational value and the potential biomass use, which wouldn't have been as high. But really, we said, what was the market value of those acres when it was state was zero? What would they be in the current market conditions? And we said those are comparable within the range that we use for hay and pasture, and therefore we assigned, assigned those acres to that same value, $1,200.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question. For an individual property owner, I mean, and Amy Roush, our assessor, will probably shoot me for saying this, but I mean, each individual landowner has a right to negotiate with the assessor's office, I guess, and get each property reevaluated, if you will, to if they feel their benefit or their tax rate is too high, based on the use of their property, and then but that information is a completely separate information than what you use.
We did not use the assessor's value.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any tax value assessed against these meandered acres, because they're not deeded.
And that was, and that's my question, I guess. So there is a benefit, if you will. the property owners are getting some benefit, or relief on their property valuation through the assessor's office based on the functionality, usability, resaleability of these acres through the assessor's office.
Our values do not meet total
And yours,
value.
yeah.
It's just that incremental change of value that the ditch provided, which means these acres are, saleable and usable
Yes.
as private property, whereas before the ditch was built, they were state lands and would have then had no value. I do run into a lot of places where the meandered or riparian acres are not included with the deeded acres. I've even ran into tillable acres that were left off because they were within the meandered acres. And the FSA had 140 acres of tillable acres, and the assessor said it was 93.
Sure.
Because they were riparian right acres and not within the original deeded lots.
And I guess where I'm going with this is there is other avenues for property owners to look at if they feel they're getting property taxes are too high or different areas within the county that a property owner can look to have their valuation looked at, changed, adjusted, if you will, not just separate from the ditch system.
Yes,
And that
two different valuations.
yes, exactly. But it is an avenue, an additional avenue for landowners to have looked at if they feel, and you're making an adjustment of 13% lower based on your information from your evaluation side.
13% less out of the total benefit
Yes.
for the ditch system today with today's considerations
Yes.
versus those that the original viewers looked at in 1905 when the lake was originally drained.
Okay. But there is multiple options, or a couple different options for individual landowners in Chicken Lake to have their property looked at from an individual property standpoint as well. I just wanna be clear on that.
But to be clear, we're really talking about the benefit of the ditch.
Yes.
Yes, this is strictly,
Value
I just wanna
attributable to
make
construction.
that clear to everybody in the room. There's different
Different.
angles to look at this from, but today the angle we're talking about is strictly ditch valuation.
Ron, whenever these situations come up and there's a readjustment or amendment to this, have you seen more flack from the other landowners once they have seen, like, our recommendation saying there's amendment saying, okay, now these acres are no longer part of, we redetermined, after your redetermination, we've decided that amended that these acres are not part of this, and then suddenly the burden of the whole ditch goes on to the other landowners? Have you seen legal action in these scenarios where those other landowners say, well, crap, now we're getting charged more because they complain, but who does it say now I'm gonna bring up this scenario and keep costing the overall ditch more money? That's what I worry about, the whole process of it, because I don't want the ditch to keep causing more money through lawyers and et cetera, et cetera.
I have had people in those discussions. I personally don't know of any appeals where somebody appealed the reduced acres values. But I've had discussions where they said they didn't agree with the board. They didn't think it was right that those acres should not have been included. The big one is especially with the state and the DNR when they don't pay. Why aren't they paying? They used to pay, those lands used to share the costs, and now all of a sudden they're taken away just because they're state. Or in the federal case, counties now will allocate part of that upfront money to the ditch system in lieu of future assessments. I've seen that happen. But maybe Cale has seen more of that. He's handled more appeals and legal issues than I have.
Can I ask Cale a question? Cale, if this was an evidentiary hearing to determine inaccuracy or accuracy of the viewer's report, have we been furnished with any evidence that says the viewer's report is incorrect?
I think because what I'm hearing the viewers say is that the value that they're recommending is based on the value of comparison properties that can be sold. I mean, I understand that theory. They're saying the ditch gave landowners an asset that can be sold. And so the value is the value of that asset. I would certainly like to hear more about the comparison property so that the board can weigh the similarities between that property and this asset and determine if those two assets are of the same value.
And in pure appraisal, just like the cost question, I would have had to search throughout the state to find similar before and after sale, because they're just few and far between. No, there are properties out there just like this. They just don't sell very often. So how far back do you go? How wide do you cast the net to find sales? I know I did an oil terminal one time in appraisal, and I started in Worthington, and my subject property was in Big Fork. So it took the entire state to find 4 sales, because there just aren't those sales. So, no, I did not go that wide. What we said is that the value of the land itself within the meander area was 0 because there was no private ownership. And in the mass approach, we put it in the same class as those that were considered for hay or pasture. Because the range that we found within the local sales was $750 for a relative sale, up to that $1,500 or $1,600 sale, other than the one in Candioi County, it was over $5,000 for the mixed water and woods. So I don't have specific sales data on exact properties. We could continue to look. We felt we put in an effort and came up with the $1,200, not the $1,500. To address the lack of access, to address that it isn't the best ground, but that it does have recreational value that was not there for the individuals prior to the ditch's construction.
I guess, a question I would have, so your evaluation has it at a 16%. Just for easy math and everybody in the room, Cale, what are you recommending that valuation be? Just,
Good luck.
well, because really we're discussing the difference, the difference of opinion. So I mean, let's get to the difference and then discuss what that difference should be. And otherwise we can ask questions all day.
It would be different for each parcel. If we were to take out the water acres that are shown on the map, there's approximately 114
Yep, 114 acres of open water.
of the open water measured on there. The original had 281 acres of reclaimed acres, so we would remove 40% of it if we took 100 acres away. Now that would affect some properties more than others if you just took that water area as the OHW and remove benefits within that wetland area.
Can I give some perspective on what a OHW, the process in which, how that's established? Is the DNR this is Joe Jacobs, one of the viewers. The process in the DNR is they would actually go out and send their survey crew and find evidence of where that original high water mark is. And the different considerations that they would use is they would use water lines, they would look at vegetative growth, they would look at the moraine, or basically the ice pushes, and they would come up with a range. And they would look at the topography of, if any topographic information is available to base different elevations on. They look at historical surveys. So they look at multiple different considerations, and then they give a set elevation. And what they consider anything below that ordinary high water mark is under the authority of the DNR. Anything above that would fall under the Wetland Conservation Act. So if you look at this map, what they would establish is they would establish a line, and that line wouldn't be here. The line would probably be right over along these areas up here. And in that, there's gonna be some areas in that meander that's included in that ordinary high water, and there's gonna be some areas that are not. But looking at the topography of this and what the DNR, just an assumption of where that line would be, it would be along this ice ridge, this basin line right through here. On my personal experience of where they've established high water marks in the past. So bottom line is that if we were to go with where their high water mark would be, many of these meandered lines would be in those areas, in their ordinary high water. And under the recommendation from the attorney, if some of those areas would be excluded, because he was saying that ordinary high water mark areas be excluded. So we would have to, try to establish where the ordinary high water mark would be for us to make those adjustments. And like Ron said, we certainly do whatever your direction is. But what we're looking at is not necessarily where that ordinary high is, but what is the value that ditch provided all of the land underneath that water. So I just want to turn that over.
So the value would be zero, is what we're talking about. We're talking
Not
about,
in our opinion.
no, but if we go that route,
If you
we're
go
talking
with-
$0 if we go the DNR high water mark versus 1,200.
If you remove
Right
all
now.
of the acres within an approximate ordinary high water mark, there are uplands within the meander line as well, but you would remove 90% of these acres. Thinking about an OHW, just because it's a flat within the lake basin, the water area itself, and the way the DNR looks at it, isn't necessarily just the water area. It would be something about that.
This is the depressional area that we're looking at, and that would be somewhere along those lines.
At this time, could I open up for landowner information? Do you folks have anything that the board is not maybe aware of or information that could be shared today? Greg, would you like to comment? Sure, sure.
My name is Greg Langmo. I'm a landowner on the east side. On your map there, if you take kind of the yellow line that goes down the middle, I'm at about the third one. Nope, to your left, Julie. Other left.
Over here, Greg, where is your?
I'll point to it. I'm located right here. Yep.
This is your house, right?
That's it, right
Okay.
there. Yep.
Also the triangle on the east end.
Yeah, and I come all the way. And I've got some of this as well. And then John is in there as well. I would just like to point out that I think what we're talking about is what is the benefit, as Commissioner Johnson. That map is highly deceiving in that I've got a couple hundred yards of pure cattails. It's been that way since I moved there just about 39 years ago now. So it is what it is, and I think Andrew and John joined myself and Dr. Haugo and a representative of the DNR a couple of weeks ago out at the county building out there to discuss this very issue. And we have to keep in mind that we are not going to be allowed to clean it back to 1904 levels. They, not official, but they have indicated that they were gonna be out there in the next 2 to 4 weeks to try to establish the ordinary high water mark. And it's my opinion that that's gonna come in at about 1114. And 1114 is gonna leave it exactly the way it is today. And while you can call it recreational, I don't know how the hell anybody hunts it. I mean, literally, you can't go out there and shoot deer. It's too rough from a biomass perspective.
I ran one of the largest biomass combustors in North America for a number of years, where we burned 100 semi-loads a day of biomass material. We looked at this very type of thing and found that it was not it's not reasonable. You can't get in there to harvest it if it's you gotta be in the winter. It doesn't freeze, it's full of snow. And then what is the DNR gonna say when you destroy habitat for animals when it's a very difficult weather condition? So my argument is that I'm not saying there isn't value to it, I'm saying the ditch and the DNR is not gonna let us go to 1904. It's gonna be basically what we see today and what it's been the 39 years that I've been there. It's gonna be cattails. I can see no open water, not even close, from my residence. And my residence sits at 1128. And then, of course, the floor is higher than 1128. And if it was like that, right on. I mean, bring the open water on. It would enhance the value of my property. But this cleaning that ditch is not going to change the value or the use of those acres. Thank you.
Greg, you indicated that the DNR is coming out in the next couple of weeks to establish that ordinary
Wasn't that
high
what
water?
they said?
I wasn't on that.
Okay.
That's
John?
what he said he was gonna try and do. I haven't heard anything
Yeah.
whether they have or not.
Yep, they were intending to come out because we asked, John and I asked, okay, are you gonna let us go to the elevation that the ditch originally was dug to? And he said, no, we usually go back around 30 years. And he said, and we don't wanna drain Chicken Lake either, but it's gonna be, about 11, would you agree that that was his comment, John?
Yes, you know, you could do the ditch cleaning, but they would reestablish a dike or a control for outlet and prevent any water from allowing to be gone out of the lake to a level that would be established by the DNR. So the lake level will be static or consistent because they won't allow you to drain it.
And they kind of hinted that they thought, just looking at the topos and the different maps they had, they thought it was gonna be around 1114. But he was gonna try to set an appointment for their surveyors to come out and look into exactly those items that Joe described.
So
But
then,
there will be a flow control of some sort.
so then, Cale and Ron, if this gets established, and once we have that data, that could potentially change everything.
This is Cale, Madam Chair, and members of the board. It's clear you have a difference of opinion between me and the viewers here. But in my opinion is that I understand the argument about comparison sales properties. But as Commissioner Johnson pointed out, this is an evidentiary hearing. So I think the board needs some evidence about what the value is of DNR restricted property for recreation. If there's no sales data out there, maybe it's because that property doesn't sell. But if that's the way the board goes and they agree with that, then yes, the setting of the ordinary high water mark would, weigh in on that line that I'm recommending the board draw for benefit.
Madam Chair, that's exactly why I asked the question about the value. I do not understand how you arrived at the value, whether I'm just missing it or, I don't know how you can. Because when we talk about values, when we have our Board of Equalization, we have, your neighbor sold his for $100,000, and then I don't know how we're getting this value, because to me, it seems like there isn't much value. And then I try to remember that it's gotta be how you are benefiting from the ditch. And so the value of that went down, 16%? 13%. That's why I struggle with this a little bit, I guess.
Commissioner Olberg, I would like to point out that when initially we were doing this, that there were around 2,000 acres included in the ditch. And now I understand that it's about 26,000 acres. So we have to be careful about which percentages we use. So if it went from 19 to 1,900 to 26,000, going from 28 to 16 seems to be, maybe it should be closer to 4 or 5%, particularly in light of the fact that they are not going to let us go back to 1904 and drain that thing completely.
Would we, Cale, be better off? I hate to say this, and I'm not making a motion, I'm just asking this for Pierce discussion. Would we be better off continuing this meeting until we have this report from the DNR as far as ordinary high water?
Madam Chair, and I think it's Commissioner Johnson who asked the question, unless there's some immediate repair costs to be incurred, being it's December, if the indication from the landowner is we'll have that information in a couple months, I don't see the harm in continuing this one more time and coming back with more specific information for the board.
Well, we do have to mention expense the longer we continue something for
Well,
what seems not that large of a.
What would the expense of this continuation be?
Not that that's the right way to look at it, but this doesn't seem like this large of a thing to me, but maybe I'm missing something.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Olberg, I think the expense would just be staff time at that continued hearing. And then also perhaps the board could ask Mr. Condon to coordinate with DNR on doing that review. I think the legal research on this is done, but perhaps maybe Mr. Condon could coordinate with DNR and bring that information back to continued hearing as to save on cost.
John, do you have anything to add here, or?
I know when going through like the CD 15 stuff, the DNRs, he told us at the meeting, we'd be out in 2 to 4 weeks is their hope to do the survey work.
Okay.
That doesn't always happen.
Okay.
It's hard to say exactly when they'll get out there. There's been times where, he's been out there and done survey work, but there's been other times where it's been months later, so it's hard to say for sure, because in that kind of situation, they need good conditions to actually be able to get out there. I think their intention was to have some ice to be able to do actual surveys. And the getting to the ice, there'll probably be a foot of ice on Chicken Lake before the cattails will be froze up before you can actually get out there.
So just because I'm curious, what does a survey entail? What are they
They
gonna?
generally take water depths,
Okay.
is probably the most common thing. Just random water depths close to the cattails in the middle, just to determine what the depth is, that's,
Some of the basic criteria that you had mentioned.
They're gonna-
Be
They'll
part
look
of
at
this.
the ice pushes, ice ridges,
Yep.
topography. May I just add, just to address your question, the primary value that we considered was without the original ditch, the landowners would not own that lake bottom.
I understand that.
And because of the drainage of that allowed the landowners to acquire that piece of property. That can be sold and, and there is a value there. I guess the question is, what should that value be? Is 1,500, is 1,000 too much? Should be 500? That's really what I think the crux is. There's some people that say, there's no value here at all, and that's, if this was just the DNR land, and I can speak that experience because we just worked on one where the DNR controlled the entire lake, and they wanted to buy into a ditch system for management purposes. They wanted to make their water body a better lake for raising ducks. To do that, they need to be able to drop that water level down. So if this was all the DNR lake, they would periodically, because this is a shallow lake, and one of the best economical ways of managing a shallow lake basin for duck production is to lower it down, consolidate the bottom, get rid of some of those cattails, and then allow the vegetation that they want to grow to come back after it's consolidated, and then it will come back and then it will be a hard bottom for the macrophytes and other bugs that the ducks like to eat. that is still being provided by the ditch, and they will still use that as a management. So 10 years from now, when they're gonna manage this lake, they will directly use this ditch system. And being that they already have access to it, they won't have to buy into it. But just to put a value on it, the last one, it was a 300-acre lake, just in Sibley County. They paid $30,000 to access our ditch system. So there is a value of having a ditch providing an outlet for it. It's our job to try to say, what is the accurate value of that? Because to say that there's no value is simply not accurate. I don't think that anybody here would say there's no value. But our job is saying, okay, what are comparable sales? And from the sample that we took, that $1,000, $1,200 an acre range is accurate. Are we willing to adjust that? It's your report. It's your decision. But Commissioner Oberg, I do want to just, I want to make sure you understand how we came about this. Is we looked at the comparable sales, and without that ditch, there would be no discussion here because this would be state land. But it's not state land because that ditch was put in. These landowners own that land. And if without the ditch, they would not. That's where the value comes. What that value is, I guess that's the big question.
Thank you.
And just on my front, in terms of my family, when we purchase land, we've purchased land that is DNR owned. The previous owner had given it to DNR. We actually throw on, like, for us, an arbitrary $1,000 per acre, because you would not get the rest of that parcel purchased without having some sort of value port to that. And that's kind of the reality of, I think, land owning is in terms of value. I mean, it's just, you might say it's useless, but you would not get the rest of that property bought unless you have some sort of value on it. And I think the viewers are saying you wouldn't have that ability because the ditch created property rights for it. So I think maybe 1,200 might be shade high. Maybe 1,000 is more appropriate. I don't know how that is determined in terms of what the viewers do in terms of zero.
We
I
could
have a
try
little-
to research more comparable sales. That would take more time for us to do so. We could certainly do that and try to get a bigger net to see what those values
And I have a couple concerns. One concern is increasing the cost of the overall ditch to everybody.
Right.
And the second concern is actually getting the ditch cleaned in a timely manner so we don't have things like is it ditch 15 or the one that we talked about that's been 10 years going? Because, I mean, honestly, you guys wanted the ditch clean because there's value there. And I just hate to delay it if we could come up with a good solution right now where everybody would be going forward with it.
Steve?
I'll piggyback off that a little bit, and that's why I was looking for what's our differential. Let's cut to the chase because that's really what we're here. Viewers are at 16%. Landowners are saying 5%. Basically at the end of the day, we're going to compromise here somewhere, and we can do reports, we can do all sorts of things, but the more money we spend, that difference is getting gobbled up.
Right.
Hiring a viewer, to go back out and do another report and letting the DNR, and so everybody, it's costing everybody more. I mean, that differential is where we're going to be, and we're always going to be there. Well, if you spend 5 times more than the differential, now you're behind. You're already above your 16% worst case scenario. So I tend to agree, unless the DNR high water mark is going to make a earth-shattering revelation here, which I don't feel it's going to. We kind of already know where it's going to be. Basically, we're picking a valuation on this project, and
the DNR isn't going to be timely.
Not you.
Well, so far you've insulted Lutherans and the DNR today.
I'm with them on the DNR.
Yeah.
Everybody very much to wait to see what the DNR says, whether it's 30 or 60 days. I don't know if that's reasonable. As long as we're not spending money, it probably doesn't matter.
John?
Yeah, I've got some comments on some of the viewers' comments.
Can you hold up for just a second?
Oh, okay.
You what?
We need a
Let's
microphone.
use a microphone so we can.
so we can make sure anyone online is recording here.
You know, the comments that, we got that land for free, you know, the people in 1904 got the land for free. You know, I paid for that land when I bought the farm. So it's not a free fee for Greg or myself or any landowner or living in that area. You know, we paid for it and we paid property tax on that ground. And what we're arguing is that the ditch tax has no benefit for that land. So there's a difference between a ditch tax and property tax. Now, he also made the comment that the control or flow regulation out of that lake with the ditch will benefit the lake based on controlling water levels. And the DNR wants open water. They don't want it to fill with cattails. And so if they would allow the water levels to go down, it would just cover with cattails. And if you've ever stepped into Chicken Lake, and I'm sure very few people in this room have, there's about 18 inches of water and there's about 6 feet of just muck. So you couldn't drain it low enough to dry it. And so the DNR wants high water to keep open water, otherwise it's all cattails.
Can I clarify? What I'm referencing again is what the project they're doing on Indian Lake in Sibley County is they're temporarily for one season dropping that water level down. And then they're reestablishing that original high water mark. But the process of dropping the water down and allowing it to bounce back is it gets rid of that muck. It condenses and consolidates that muck. All that material in there will basically get pushed down, and then when it gets reflooded, a lot of those hybrid cattail areas actually are gone, and it's better habitat for fish. I mean, that's the standard process in which the DNR is using to reclaim a lot of these shallow lake basins, is to do a seasonal drawdown, and then that will, one, get rid of all the rough fish, and then number two, it will consolidate the bottoms, and it regenerates the plant growth and the macrophyte or the bug growth that will produce better habitat for ducks. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The DNR, they do not want to have that, that drained condition, but they do want to try to mimic what nature does. And then what nature does is it draws down and it bounces back. And the ditch provides that outlet to do that type of drawdown, and that's what they actually purchased from the Sibley County ditch system just 2 months ago. So.
I have some other comments. You know, they talk about recreational benefit. Well, DNR law with state-owned waters, if you have legal access to that water, a landowner that has water above his ground cannot restrict access to that water. And so an individual accessing on another site can access any part of that basin. And that even goes into the cattails. So they can travel across the open water, put their duck boat into the cattails, and they're perfectly legal. They just can't step out of the boat. So there is no intrinsic value. You can't establish a barricade on the open water. You can't put duck blinds attached to your ground that's below the water. So you can't interfere with any navigation in public waters. So the value is not there. So does that ditch create value for me, or does it create value for my property? So the ditch is not creating value. The property is being enhanced in its value. I think the ditch actually detracts from the value of that property. And if you look at the assessment and the evaluation of benefits, they give more value to the open water and the cattails that the DNR controls than the rest of my farm. I pay 13% of the total assessment for the ditch. 7.5% of that 13, or so I've got 7.5% that goes for open water and cattails, and I've got 5.5% that goes to the rest of my farm. That doesn't seem right.
And that's a question for the assessor's office.
Well, I'm not gonna argue with the assessor's office, because that's property tax. This is a ditch tax, that's different.
Well, and I still, at the end of the day, we're arguing about a percentage gap in valuation. So, I mean, how much money do we want to spend to discover what that number should be? I mean,
What the board should do is they should establish that high water mark, and that land that's inside the high water mark should have no value as far as the ditch is concerned. If you wanna assess property tax to it, then go right ahead, but not a ditch tax.
Kale, I have a question. This is Barb Block, County Auditor. If we were to continue this hearing as we have from the November meeting to now, would we notice all the other landowners so they become privy to all this information? And set a specific time or leave it open for maybe an independent report from the DNR?
Chair Bredesen and Commissioner Auditor Locke, the code does not require a renotice as long as the continued hearing date, time, and location are set today. If the board were to continue it indefinitely and then ask staff to come back when ready to reset the hearing date, then we would have to renotice.
So in essence, what you're saying is if we do this the first meeting in March, giving us 2 months, and at that point, we did or didn't have the information, we could always postpone it at that point. And that would probably eliminate the stalemate as an option.
As long as at each continued hearing, if you continued again, you set the date, time, and location, renotice is not required.
Thank you.
So what are our options for action today? We can postpone till March. Did I hear a date of March? And invite DNR. Continue discussion. We can vote on a motion. We can amend and vote on a motion. Am I looking at these three options?
I think so.
What would the board like to do today? Have we heard? I want to make certain that those in attendance have had an opportunity to speak. Is there anything more that should come before the board at this time? But as I'm looking at this, those are our three options. Continue and ask for DNR input, vote on what we have before us, or vote with an amendment. Am I correct? What would the board like to do today?
When you did your math over there, what did you come up with per acre?
well, and one thing that's been running through my mind here, last week there was a piece of property sold up by Watkins with 78 acres of tillable on it out of 113, and it brought $5,000 an acre with the wasteland included, which is basically unusable land. So I mean, if the 1,200 is high, I'm kind of leaning with the $1,000 valuation that Commissioner Schiefelbein mentioned. I mean, we have to put basically, we're putting a value on it, one, at it, either today or if they ain't got a report done in March, we're postponing again, I mean, and then we're not getting ditches cleaned and we're spending money over, you know, there's a point where you throw good money at bad, and I don't know that that's necessarily, how long do we wait here?
John?
So Commissioner, are you putting value on the property tax or are you putting value on the ditch tax?
I'm adjusting the viewer's report valuation.
So you're saying that there's value for the ditch tax on property that there's no benefit?
Well, I think that ditch was there 100 years ago, and there's nobody in this room that's that old, including myself, and that ditch will be there 100 years from today, and we're arguing about a differential in value of the ditch. Our task is to put a value on that, and we have to be realistic because it's not going to be exempt. Because if that's exempt, I can guarantee you the auditor here is going to get busy with other ditches and John Condon that people are going to want out.
Well, if it's correct, then they should get busy with it.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you're taxing property that should not be taxed and you're doing it a lot of ways for a lot of people, then it should be changed. Because it's hard to do, it doesn't make it right.
But I believe the viewers are following statute as well, and I think Kale is following statute as well, but we need to assign a value. That's what we're tasked to do here.
Value for the ditch or
Yes.
value for the property?
The ditch.
Okay, and so the ditch actually would decrease my property value because it allows access because of public water.
And
If the ditch wasn't there, it would not be public water.
I think, is it Joe? I'm sorry. He addressed that already. Would you like to reiterate that? If the ditch wasn't there, you made a comment earlier that if there was no ditch, you wouldn't own the land.
Correct.
So there is a value.
I would own land up until
That's not,
wherever the water was. But, you know, I can't restrict access to anybody on that public water.
I understand that.
The value, and you know, the cattails don't just stop at the high water mark. They run for yards, many yards, into my property that is beyond the public or the private or the high water mark. And so, to me, there's absolutely no benefit to me for having that ditch. Other than maybe on my property tax, but I don't think I should be taxed on the ditch assessment.
Well, and by us going out further and doing further investigation and further report, now we're assigning dollars to a ditch system that the other landowners, now that we've done a redetermination, are gonna pay for. And I have to find a point in here where we stop throwing good money after bad to discuss a differential, which is what this board is tasked to do today.
Well, maybe a study should be done on what would happen if you abandoned ditch 19. Because the DNR, you know, they don't want it drained anyway.
Well, how much do we want to spend? That's exactly my point. There comes a point when we're discussing differential, and I'm not going to argue with you because that's really all we're tasked to do here today. And we can drag this out, but we're throwing good money after bad. I mean, we're going to spend more money doing reports than what the whole project would cost at the end of the day.
So the county's money is good and mine's bad?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Because
We're going to spend way more discussing this differential than what the whole project will cost if we keep going. And our job, what we were tasked by Kale and the viewers through this investigation, to put a value on this project, on this system. That's ultimately our bottom line here today. And we can delay, we can do this stuff.
a good compromise would be to not tax the area that's inside the high water mark.
Well, and I think my position is that we'd move forward with putting a valuation on it today and move forward. And we're making a compromise lower, and the viewers already made a compromise lower, so we're addressing your issue.
And it's all your money, by the way. It's none of counties, because everybody on the ditch pays for anything that happens, so it's not.
Yeah,
you
it's,
know.
it's not, if I use county money, that's what I'm saying, it's ditch system money, so all these people are paying for these investigations and research and stuff too,
What
and
I'm
that's.
saying is you've gotta differentiate between property tax and ditch tax.
Yep.
And I think that's where you're failing to see.
So my question, Madam Chair, is if we wait and hope that the DNR does this survey, are we gonna gain anything out of that? I don't think it's gonna be any more expense for us, if I'm understanding that correctly, right, Barb?
Wouldn't there be an expense for the study or
Well,
not?
the DNR doesn't.
The DNR would not charge us for that
we
particular
are-
study?
There'd be time,
Yeah.
I'll let Kale.
Staff time?
Oh,
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Maybe the question would be, if the DNR cannot by March 1st establish its opinion of the ordinary high water mark, would the viewers be able to come back to that March 1st meeting with an adjustment on the acres? That would give the board time between today and then to consider the value of those acres, or the board could set a value today and ask the viewers to come back. In so doing, you would give the DNR an opportunity to set that line and go with that line. If they can't, you would have a final decision at your March meeting so that in the 2022 construction season, things could move forward. As far as additional legal fees, it would simply be my time at that continued hearing. Maybe Ron can speak to what the viewers charge to do further work, if anything. And then, as we talked about with Auditor Locke, as long as the next hearing date is set for time, location, and date, there would be no additional cost for renoticing. So the question would be for Ron and Mr. Jacobs. If the DNR cannot set that ordinary high water mark to differentiate these acres, would the viewers be able to do it by March? And if so, what additional cost is that?
I'm looking at, just to make an adjustment, would probably take the group a half a day, which is $500 to $1,000 at the most, time everybody gets there. The question still remains then is what adjustment would be made? Would you want us to spend time doing further research, trying to find public water sales? Or is there a percent of the $1,200 value that you think should be applied? Because, you know, from our local sales of similar properties, we're in that $12,000 to $1,200. $1,000 to $1,500, we settled at 12, because that was our pasture value, and rather than set separate values. If it was a percentage adjustment, it's very easy to make that in a report and say it's 50% of the other value, and we put, instead of 100% proximity, you put a 50% in there, and it cuts those values in half. The question is the support for that value? Do we continue to look for sales of public water lands that are within like this, the meandered areas, or other private sales on a wider basis? We may end up way up north where there are other places that are spreading out more than the 3 surrounding counties. You know, I can't support a different number without a basis for that number. And what we've done is we've said, yep, the sales should be about 1,000 to 1,500. 1,200 is probably a reasonable number under a mass approach, but I can adjust that very easily if the board thinks that 16% of the current benefit is still too high. Whatever adjustments you want to make, it's easy to do on a percent of that 281 acres that are within the reclaimed acres.
I go back to what you said. This wouldn't be an issue if there was no benefit, if there was no ditch. It wasn't until the ditch and the benefit came along that this land became owned. So there is a benefit.
Have
And the
these
ditch
been
was
looked-
there before us. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
before anybody, so I mean,
And it was put
That's
in for a
established.
reason, to
Yeah.
benefit landowners. Has some research been done? I looked into one time about some property that we owned, or RIM, different things through soil and water conservation, where a property owner owns a piece of property and then that is not really sold, but it's dealt with soil and water conservation. There's a value placed on that. I don't know where exactly you get all of your comparables from, if it has to be an actual land sale, or if it can be something that deals with some of these other programs where a value is placed on some land.
And those are the things that we did consider. Was looking at all of the values and how different agencies put values on
Sure.
various properties, and what, even the DNR sales, which are not good sales, but what the DNR pays for properties similar to this.
Well, that really isn't.
Yeah, that's,
I wouldn't consider that.
I wouldn't consider
No,
that
but you look
either.
at it, you do.
That opens a whole new can of worms on
Yes,
my
it
Yeah.
does. It's even federal sales are,
Yeah.
but that's a whole different thing, but you look at that because, there are different sales criteria that different agencies or individuals or organizations use to determine value. We try to find arm's length, individual to individual sales. Like I said, the lower value sales we found were relative sales, so they weren't considered good. Maybe they were true market value. We don't know that.
True.
But they were not considered good sales because they were between relatives.
Sure.
And so, in an appraisal, it just takes a lot of research for unique properties.
Yeah.
And it could run up to $4,000 or $5,000 in a hurry, trying to put all of that in a, full appraisal. So that you have all of the justifications and all of the reasons and all of the adjustments we made and all of the considerations. And you may end up with 20 or 30 or 40 different sales and then try to piece out the parts that aren't the same. And it's just very involved, and so.
And what if it pushes the value up? I mean, there is a gamble of it, that it might support a higher number, a higher percentage.
So, Madam Chair, if I'm saying this right, and I'm no expert on ditches, first of all, this board has to establish that these folks actually are benefiting from the ditch, right? That's our first, right? They have a benefit from the ditch, and then we have to determine what percentage of that ditch line. So, are you folks saying you don't benefit from it at all?
I say the dry land, the woodlot on my property would benefit from the ditch, just as the person who lives 10 miles south of town benefits from the ditch. The water all has a drainage. But the portion of the ditch that is public water, that is above ground, that,
That's the part that, right,
that I think is not receive a benefit.
okay.
I can sell that ground, but the benefit that the ditch creates doesn't enhance the value of that ground.
Right, I understand.
The ground is enhanced as a value for property tax assessments, not for ditch tax
Yeah.
assessments.
It's the separation.
And not to argue with John, but I'm sure every landowner
Right.
thinks
We've
their
heard this
land is
before,
not
I
is positively affected by the ditch if they're a half a mile away, but the slope is there and there's some sort of benefit. It's hard to go down this road. I don't want to go down this road if we don't have to, because I don't want to get contentious about it. I just like to have resolution of some sort of commonality between all this, just to cut more red tape, keep the costs down, and get the ditch clean. That would be my goal. I don't want any contentiousness, because we're just speculating on. You say it's maybe zero, and there's got to be some sort of benefit there, because otherwise you wouldn't own it. And I understand you bought it, but you wouldn't have the opportunity to buy it.
Right.
So
Well, that's-
it's very, believe me, ditch law is not, it's not one of my highlights. No offense, Barb.
Madam Chair,
But-
in the rest of the commissioners. If we were to take Ron's $1,200 fee and reduce that by 34%, that would leave it at $800 an acre.
Well, that's fine. Why, how did you get that? We have to have a reason for
Well,
doing
they
it.
had 12,
Okay,
okay, and I started penciling some percentages here. I just came up with 34 because looking at the 29, 16, so on and so forth. But I just wanted to throw it out there. Danny threw out a 1,000.
That's all I'm asking is let's bounce some numbers here.
Yeah, I agree.
Cause we're gonna end up making a decision
Yep.
today or 6 months from now or 2 months from now. And how much money do we spend to make that decision when we know that decision is coming and we know relatively close where we're gonna be?
Because I believe there is a benefit,
Yeah,
you know.
well, that was my question. Have we established there is a benefit?
Yes.
Okay, so now we have to establish what their benefit is. What percentage of that ditch you benefit
Are you
from?
establishing the benefit for the public water land versus the non-public water
Right.
land, or you're including it all together?
How do
we're
we,
adjusting the viewer's report
Yes.
percentage.
That's-
That's what we're voting on.
Would you
That's
ask
what we
your
meant.
attorney what his opinion is?
Kale, would you like to comment? Did you hear the question?
I did, and Commissioner Chair, Madam Chair, what I'm hearing from the board is that the board would like to approve the viewer's report with an amendment to the acres that are public waters and is looking to set a value for those acres.
That's how
Madam
I
Chairman,
understand it.
It would be the reclaimed acres within that were listed in the original report, the 281 acres. So it's not just because we don't know what the public waters are. I think the discussion should focus on that 281 point something acres that was reclaimed as part of the original ditch construction.
Explain the reclaim part.
Well, reclaimed was all of those acres within the original meander line that weren't owned until the ditch system drained it, and those riparian rights were granted as a part of that. And that, according to the original report, was 281 acres.
So the 200.
And Ron, are all of those acres subject to public waters restrictions or underwater or cattail vegetated?
I can't tell you that. I know there are upland areas within the meander lines. But the easy way to adjust that is to do that 281 acres rather than trying to separate whether they happen to be uplands within the meander line or whether they were down lower. It would be an overall adjustment based on our mass classification for that Chicken Lake bed.
And Madam Chair, if I may just continue with Ron, if the board would use the reclaimed acres rather than the public waters acres, that would be a further reduction for the riparian landowners than using the public water line, is what you're saying.
What number of acres difference are we talking here? I wrote down 281. What would the other be?
Upland acres might be 10% of that number is all.
I see.
I'll make one quick comment. On the aerial calculator that I use for Chicken Lake, I went around all the cattails, what I would consider part of the Chicken Lake Basin, and I came up with about 275 acres of either cattails or open water, combination of the two.
So we're,
181 acres of reclaimed acres, I would say, is pretty accurate of what that basin is going to entail.
Those are the acres we're talking about, 0 versus 1,200, just to make that clear, right?
Correct.
Those are the acres are in question.
so if we set a value of 800, these 281 acres would be valued then at that amount, and the ditch tax would be assessed to property owners at that value. Am I correct?
That would be taking 1/3 of the value, the recommended value away because of the public waters designation.
I see.
And then that would just switch to other property owners.
Well, the
The
cost would
increase,
switch, but
right.
we're talking individual.
That's what I'm
benefit.
talking
Yeah,
about.
the
That's
cost
what you will be
fits, yeah.
doing, percentage wise, is saying, okay, now the cost goes up to everybody else who's on the, whatever, where it's receiving benefits.
At the end of the day, the number has to equal 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's real, that's what I mean, it's a differential,
Yeah, when we're reducing the 281, we're increasing everybody
Right.
else. But we're not increasing costs that may even be higher if you do a study on this. And it's gonna be impossible to find a per acre study, period, because it's always gonna be hooked to something else, and it depends what that person puts value on those non-DNR public acres versus, cause it's, no one ever buys just that 281 part, those acres.
There are or have historically been sales similar to that, but the matter is finding them.
Few and far between is what I mean.
Updating them and adjusting for location and all of the things that we tried to stay within this area for our recreational value sales.
And I'm gonna make one comment, and John, I wanna address I understand your concerns. And this is an example, and this is an actual factual example. Up in Manana Township, section 14, there's a 240 feet of pipe, 2-foot pipe, got put through high productive farmland to cross between two fields, in a man-made section of the ditch. Wetland on both ends. And this was put in about 6 years ago. Never disturbed a cattail, was put in flat, did not increase drainage, did not do anything but provide a crossing between those two fields and the highland, left the wetlands alone on either side. The DNR came in and declared them a public waterway. They then told the landowner, you will take out 180 feet of pipe, and you'll put in a 50-foot buffer on each side of that, and we'll give you 60 feet for a crossing. Now, I don't like to use the word government overreach, but I argued for 2 years on that, back and forth to DNR on that landowner's behalf, and guess what? He spent $1,100, took the pipe out and seeded in 100 feet of grass on each side of that ditch. So as much as I don't agree with the DNR on things, there's a point where you can fight and argue all you want, and you're going backwards. And that was my whole point. So I'm not arguing against you. I know how some of this stuff goes, and it's the wrong direction some days, but it is what it is, and when it comes to that. So.
Madam Chair, may I ask Cale a procedural question? So, Cale, if the board sets on the $800 per acre today, are we able to move forward with the final adoption of the findings, or do we need to continue this in order for further amendment?
Madam Chair and Mr. Lexon, I do have proposed revisions to the draft findings in the board packet if the board wants to set a value for those acres and move on them today.
Okay.
Now, rest of the commissioners, the 800 is arbitrary. I mean, we need to set this
I
with
wanna
everybody in agreement.
revisit
I
that.
just threw that out
No,
there.
No, and I think it's valid. I mean, we gotta discover a number.
It's a number.
There's something, because whenever we purchase land, there's always something, even on that kind of land, even land where people can, like you say, go on public waters and hunt, and it just drives you nuts or whatever. But they can do that, and we buy it for a reason. There is some inherent value there. Where it's at is what I'd like to just kind of get the conclusion with. It's not zero, which is what you're intending, but at least it's a reduction, and hopefully that's a nice compromise in terms of this government and ditch law and all this, et cetera, et cetera.
We don't make motions during this part, right?
He'll have a recommend.
Okay. Very good.
And that's all I'd want, and I think that's what most of us here are just trying to get a good conclusion, and where the viewers say, okay, that's understandable. We tried to set a number, we thought it was a good number, maybe it was high, that's up to us to determine if, with some reason, reasoning behind it. And I think it's just, I always looked at it and I was like going, I don't think it's zero, because then I don't think it's fair to all the other landowners in terms of that and the precedent it sets. But I do think it's maybe should be reduced a little bit to some degree. And what number that is, I don't, like I said, my $1,000 was just actual value that we look at it, cause
Well-
you're talking about the rest of the whatever.
But to
But that's
speak,
different than ditch value. We're trying to,
and I'll give you my math where I validated the 1,000 was 16% versus, Greg mentioned 5%. It was 11% difference. So you take $1,200 and 11% of that reduction, your ballpark $1,000. I mean, that's the way I was looking at it to find it. That's where I is.
And this 40-acre sale for a comparable was at 15.
Yeah.
So I was thinking 1,000 in my head, but
So, Kale, I'm not making a motion. But would the recommended motion be, motion to adopt findings and order approving the redetermination of benefits with an amendment providing for the 281 acres at a certain dollar value, acquiring the grass buffer, confirming damages, and directing payment for Meeker County Ditch 19? Would that be in order?
Yes, but Madam Chair and Commissioner Johnson, I would like to go through the revisions to the draft
Okay.
findings with you since we haven't before doing that, and I can keep that limited to just the revisions. Because you have had this in your board packet since November 17th, the new one since this latest board packet, and it involves only 3 paragraphs that I'd recommend changing.
would you like to address that right now, Kale?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. So in your board packet, if the board were to adopt findings in order today, setting a dollar value for the reclaimed acres, I would start with the first revision being to paragraph 31. It reads, before there can be an assessment, there must be some benefit directly or indirectly to the land involved. The Drainage Authority Board of Commissioners finds that there is, and then strike no present, so that it continues, there is benefit to the acres reclaimed to private ownership beneath Chicken Lake when County Ditch 19 was constructed. I would then strike the rest of that paragraph and insert, the viewers find that comparable properties are sold for value and that County Ditch 19 created the private right of ownership to be sold. However, the board finds that, and then I would insert the dollar amount set by the board, per acre is reasonable for the value of such private lands. So the paragraph would read, before there can be an assessment, there must be some benefit directly or indirectly to the land involved. The Drainage Authority Board of Commissioners finds that there is benefit to the acres reclaimed to private ownership beneath Chicken Lake when County Ditch 19 was constructed. The viewers find that comparable properties are sold for value and that County Ditch 19 created the private right of ownership to be sold. However, the board finds that blank per acre is reasonable for the value of such private lands. Second change would be to strike paragraph 32. And then if you go down to the order in paragraph A, where it says at the last sentence, reflect no benefits, we would strike no benefits and we would change that to the board's approved dollar amount per acre. If the board wanted to finalize this today, those would be the changes I would recommend. And so the motion would be to approve the draft findings as amended by council and to direct the viewers to amend the viewers report to change the value to, and then insert your dollar amount per acre for the reclaimed Chicken Lake acres.
We're just down to a dollar amount.
We're down to a dollar amount is correct.
and would the viewers support this in terms of that? Because before, you had some hesitancy to put it at $0. Am I
No.
right or not?
We feel that, and recommend it to the board, that there is benefit to these lands because of the ditches construction and granting them those real estate rights. The value, we have no problem with the board changing because ours we felt was supported, but not with the public water restrictions. And we'll accept whatever reduction the board recommends at that time.
And just to be clear, currently we're at 29%.
today, yeah.
Of the total benefit, current without the redetermination, the Chicken Lake properties are paying 29% of all costs.
Okay.
The change would be fit right now, with
Yep.
the way this is, it'd be 16.
It
Right.
currently is,
Yes,
the
that
recommendation
1200
as,
is
as
the-
recommended at 16%.
Yes.
Reduction will go from 16 to,
Whatever.
at $1,000 to 12%, and at 800 maybe to 10% of the total benefits. But the change is only the value to those acres, and the rest of the numbers fall where they do.
So at 29%, we're looking at $1,200 per acre?
No.
29% is what the Chicken Lake
original.
property, the
That's
281 acres currently are paying 29% of all costs.
Okay. Do we have a per acre dollar figure on that?
It was $60 or something. But it was $1905.
It's just a percentage. You can't look at dollars
Right.
at that point.
Okay.
Keep
Just
talking about
they
it.
reduced it already because they saw less
Because we
benefit.
included and brought in the rest of the properties and reduced their value proportional to the rest of the contributing properties. You know, Joe said there are 16,000 acres within the watershed, above where the city takes over 19. Most of those are contributing properties above the lakes. There's only a very small direct watershed between Lake Ripley and the outlet into the city.
So we're just adjusting it either 2 to 4% or whatever that is, basically, is what we're doing. From what they assessed, we're reducing it one more step. Because of John and Greg's argument.
Madam Chair, if I may, you have two numbers that have been put out. I would suggest maybe polling the board to see if what each commissioner feels would be the most appropriate, 800 or 1,000.
Yep, we have two figures, and I don't know if you gentlemen care to further explain your justification for those numbers, or if we
I
simply
think I
want to.
explained mine based on just what, when we, as a family, how we go about it in terms of actual value. I don't know, I'm not saying that's justified, but that's what I would stick with.
And another thing to remember is, as the viewers had mentioned, the range of sales that they had found was 1,000 to 1,500, and that's why they landed at the 1,200. So the 1,000 fits within that range.
Yep.
And I support Commissioner Schiefelbein's $1,000. I'm comfortable with that.
Beth,
That's fine.
Steve?
Yeah, and my math was coming out real close to. So I'm
I would
supportive.
support the 1,000. Do we need to entertain a motion at this point?
Yes, you'd
to
be
move
entertaining
forward?
the motion that Kale suggested.
We'll take Kale's rewording. It was on page 5 of your packet, if you had cared to follow along. I did. So we need to set a dollar figure. I would entertain a motion.
I will move that motion as printed and amended by our council, inserting $1,000.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion. It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Is this a roll call?
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Okay. Excuse me for that. And
We
I
all bit
will-
right into it too, so hopefully we can correct.
I will ask Corey, would you read the roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Schiefelbein.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ober.
Yes,
Commissioner Bredesen.
Yes. By roll call vote, it is unanimous. The vote carries. Wonderful discussion.
Chairman, we will prepare the report with the amendments and get it submitted both to Kale and to Barb, so.
I thank
you
you
for
for
your
your
time today.
discussion.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
This was very
appreciate
good.
it.
Yeah, very good. So if we have no further action that needs to come before the County Ditch Authority at this time, do we have any additional?
No.
Nothing more at this point. We will adjourn as County Ditch and reconvene as the county board.
And immediately move to recess.
So,
But we will take a break.
Let's get Barb out of here.
oh yeah, and
Oh, we want to get Barb rolling?
and Ariana has indicated that she has a personal item that she would need to leave. half an hour, and so she has a couple items immediately after Barb. So it's your choice how you want to handle it.
Okay, well, let's deal with Barb here first.
We got a good problem to have, right?
This is a nice.
Thank you.
Thank
deal.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John.
Appreciate
your
Thank you. Yep, very good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So as we move on
Yeah.
into the item
Thank
that
you,
I
gentlemen.
have next, that
Thank you.
Meeker County Extension appointment, and as, somebody just indicated, we have a good problem there, or likely a good problem.
Yep.
We have, requested the motions to appoint to fill a vacancy. We had the superintendent have to step aside from her duties and not, the extension committee was just too overwhelming.
Okay.
And has found that Chelsea Brown from the school system would fill that spot very nicely as a community representative, so we're recommending that. We have 3 applicants for 2 positions. The 5-member representation is throughout the county, but it doesn't necessarily require 1 through 2, 3, 4, 5, so you have some options there. But we have 3, I believe, wonderful applicants, and it would be up to you to make a choice for 2 of them to be placed on the committee. I did put on there for you the terms of different individuals or that are not expiring. And just for your information, we would have the term in Commissioner District 3 complete next year. So if you were looking at a 1 to 5 sequence, that would be something to consider. But I'm only throwing that out there so that some of you that aren't on the committee know that that commitment is still there for year on 3.